Okay, I'm ready. Hopefully, wait. I don't know if everything is. It should be fine. It looks like my levels are fine. Okay. Anyway.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So do you wanna
You start off the fun fact.
do that? No, you do that intro.
Fun fact. We actually don't know how we initially began domesticating non-livestock animals, but one theory says that we did so by accident. To be more specific, the precursors to modern-day dogs and cats may have begun to tag along with human nomads or stick around human settlements to feed on the food scraps of the humans, reducing their competition for food and hence aggression towards one another, enabling friendly bonds to be created. If you want to hear more about that, a link for the new scientist will be provided in the show notes.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Fighting Failure, the podcast where we discuss solutions to the climate crisis. I'm Hisham, and I'll be your host for this episode.
I'm Oscar, your co-host.
This is episode 38, all about pets and the consumerism surrounding our not always furry, but perennially friendly companions. We all love pets. I have 2 dogs, a cat, and countless chickens and ducks in the yard. I'll let you in on a secret. They multiply. And Oz has Monty, his adorable little pug. Companion animals are everywhere, and they have been for a very long time now.
Anyway, let's move on to the consumerism-based problems that we've brought about with our pets.
So problem number 1 is pet food. In the USA alone, almost 10 million tons of pet food are produced every year.
And pet food uses a lot of processed meat products. And this, of course, entails all the problems of the meat industry that we've talked about countless times before, whether this be the incredible use of land and water, as well as the massive animal rights violations that come with it.
So, I mean, of course, there's all those smaller implications of meat that we've talked about in the past. The ones that, are so commonly advertised, like methane and cow burps and whatever. But there's a lot of other things that make the meat industry really detrimental. And one of them is land usage, like Oscar mentioned. The meat industry requires a large amount of space. I mean, already the size of the scale of the meat industry to support humans is so large that to additionally have to support like pet food and now the pet food industry, just the scale of the meat industry in countries such as the US and Australia and a lot of other Western countries, Brazil, worldwide, is incredible.
Yeah, and a lot of people might think, oh, the meat industry, how much land does that use? Because when you're driving around the countryside, you might not see that many farms full of animals. But I think the important thing to mention is that, yes, maybe we see like so many sheep in the fields or so few sheep in the fields and cows in the fields or factory farms everywhere. That is a comparatively small amount of land used compared to the total amount of land that's used for the meat industry. And that's because most animals aren't raised pastorally. They aren't feeding on the pastures. They aren't eating the grass. They're eating corn or soy or some other crop that's grown for them that's then fed to them as feed rather than them living off the land. And so, for example, I was recently in rural Gloucestershire for my Duke of Edinburgh silver expedition, and we were walking through these fields and we saw this field of corn and we were like, oh, that's corn. And we looked more closely and we could actually see that this corn was not for human consumption, but it was clearly maize that's meant for animal consumption. So you might see all these fields and fields of crops, but actually most of the crops that you see, especially if it's corn or maize or soy or anything like that, are not actually being grown for humans. So that all that land that you see that looks like it's being grown arable crops is actually just an extension of the land that's used for the meat industry.
I found a statistic here from Our World in Data, which is states that about 77% of global farming land is can be accounted for by livestock, and the land that we use to grow crops for animal feed, like Oscar was just mentioning. And I mean that's a huge portion of our land that we're giving to the meat industry, and then so obviously, the problems with expansion in this sector, and supporting the meat industry then is that we get further encroachment into the natural land.
Yeah, precisely. Because when people say that, we can't adopt plant-based diets because we need meat to support a growing population, That is just so false. If we need to, or if we want to support a population that is likely going to approach 11 billion people, that's probably, I think that's where the population of the world is meant to settle. You can't feed 11 billion people with animal products. It's not possible. If we're using so much of our farmable land for meat, then the only way to really rectify that and to feed so many people is by converting so much of that arable land into crops for human consumption instead of for animal consumption. And that way we can actually reduce the amount of total farmland while increasing the amount of people that we can actually feed with what we grow.
Yeah, and then obviously a lot of these products are also not grown sustainably. And so then you have all the implications that are brought about by the methods of growth surrounding those feed crops. I mean, a lot of them are grown using pesticides, a lot of them are grown using fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. And I mean, if you go back to season one when we talked about that, you'll know that they have greatly detrimental effects on soil quality and soil microbes, microbial life, and it just makes the land, it makes the soil quality degrade, and that just kind of makes the entire piece of land useless in time.
Yeah, you're so right. And so even if we didn't change these farming methods, one way that we can make agriculture more sustainable is just by reducing the amount of farming that we do. And by having both more sustainable farming methods and less farming. I think it's actually crucial that we reduce the amount of land that's being farmed, because any kind of farming is going to be more detrimental than just leaving that to its natural uses. So yeah, anyway, that is quite a bit of a tangent, but the whole point of explaining why the meat industry is so detrimental is to point out that according to one study, and this is published by Now Magazine, or Now Magazine referenced this one study found that cats and dogs account for 25 to 30% of the environmental impact of meat consumption in the United States. So I think that is pretty crazy if you think about it. It's probably mostly because compared to human diets, which may, on the most part, compose a large amount of meat, the diets that we feed our pets are almost entirely composed of meat and meat scraps and that sort of thing. So that's not necessarily that 25 to 30% of food consumption in the United States is for pets. It's probably not. But they have an outsized environmental impact compared to their weight. So that's why if you go in, for example, the WWF's carbon calculator, they will ask you, do you have a pet? Um, because that, and the sort of the size of the dog or whatever, because that actually has a significant impact on your carbon footprint.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, all this food is being processed an obscene amount.
Of course, and talking about the other scenarios surrounding the pet food, other than how it's grown itself, whether it be crops or through livestock production, the other big problem is, of course, the packaging that pet food comes in. And for the most part, this is going to be unrecyclable. And this problem is very much similar to what we have with all types of food that are plastic and packaged in plastic, because I think these sort of two problems are going to be solved in concert with each other at the same time as we reduce the amount of plastic packaging and things. But I think for something like pet food, a sort of a bag quite similar to what you use for like flour, like those big sort of paper bags that are quite thick, quite tough.
Yeah, thing is though, I mean, us, the surprising thing with those is that, those companies are kind of lying to you when they, a lot of those plastic, those paper bags, that you're starting to see, if they have that waxy sort of laminate on the outside, it's not wax, it's not biodegradable wax. I'll tell you that much. It's a sort of very thin, waxy plastic that they've just laminated onto the outside of the paper, so that even once the paper inside has biodegraded, that plastic is you still have the effect of the plastic. I mean, it'll still break down. It'll break down into microplastics, of course, and then that'll cause all types of problems. And so, yeah, I mean, it seems more friendly at a glance, and it is a step forward, but it is sort of devious. I mean, it's not just because something's in a paper bag or wax paper. I mean, does not mean that it's.
No, you're so right. Because when I've been in Europe recently on holidays, I've seen a fair number of paper cups. And that paper cups are better than plastic cups, whatever. And for example, I saw they was in the bathroom on the ferry, or when I was staying at a French person's house, this was the cups that they were using to drink out of. But I noticed, like, on the side of the cup, it says in like four different languages. It's like plastique en produit, or plastico in el producto, or whatever like that. It translates to there is plastic in this product. So it's probably due to European Union regulations, but these makers of what looks like an innocent paper cup are forced to like put this little sticker with a picture of a dying turtle on it saying, don't throw this away. This actually does have plastic in it, so you need to just throw it away with everything else. And so I imagine like reducing the amount of plastic in it is good, but it's actually really annoying that this small amount of contamination of plastic means that the whole thing can't be properly disposed of and recycled.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, that causes a huge amount of problems. I mean, we buy dog food here, not the best dog food, probably not the best environmentally, not the best for our dogs as well, but it's what we can get in Malawi, and it comes in these huge plastic, sort of like meshy bags, um, and it's not recyclable. I mean, a lot of these plastics aren't recyclable, so there is that. I mean, plastics, of course, as we've talked about in our recycling episode, are finitely recyclable, so they can only be recycled so many times. But still, I mean, they're not recyclable plastics, and they're non-reusable plastics. And so once you're done with them, that huge plastic bag, it's gonna go into some landfill or go into the ocean. And I mean, so that's really distracting, Oscar.
Sorry.
Or something is gonna um it's gonna end up somewhere in our environment. And so I mean, obviously packaging is a huge worry, huge concern surrounding pet food and our our consumption of, not our consumption, but our purchasing of pet food.
Yeah, I mean, but like this is obviously all related to pets, but there's obviously the thing that this is just a generally part of the broader problems with the food system as well. Um, yeah. So other problems with pets, I think a lot of things like pet toys, pet supplies, leashes, collars, harnesses. These are all primarily composed of plastic, synthetic materials. I think I'll add in there poo bags for dogs. Obviously, you should pick up your dog's poo, but then that's causing a massive amount of plastic. I'll talk about what we do for that in the solution section with our dog. But
I mean, it's just the same as synthetic materials, obviously. So with those leashes, collars, harnesses, like we've talked about in the past, I mean, they need to be washed. If you're overwashing them, then those synthetic materials can shed microplastics, and if they're all composed of synthetics, then eventually when you throw them out and they're non-recyclable, it's just going to add to that, the massive plastic that's either in the landfill or ultimately in the ocean, or whatever the case is. So I mean, just what we use with our pets, and it's hard to avoid it. I mean, it's almost impossible to avoid it, but it's just sort of like the most basic, most fundamental problems with the production of everything nowadays, is that it has to be synthetic, because that's what we've sort of identified as the best way to produce things, is using synthetic materials.
okay, so the next issue, and again, this is really similar to the sort of thing that we've talked about before, with like fast fashion, and so pet fashion, which is like it's sort of just like imagine the emoji just like like people dress up their dogs for Halloween or for dog fairs or anything like that. It really grates me. I don't really like it at all.
Yeah, I think it's just weird.
Yeah, I mean, fashion is already such a big problem. Why are we then forcing this problem onto these pets that have no choice in the matter?
I mean, and it's not like they look comfortable as well in their little Spider-Man
Yeah,
outfits.
exactly. Like it must be really tight fitting. Like dogs and cats have natural fur. They don't need to wear coats unless it's like a greyhound, and then you have those like sort of little coats for them that are designed for greyhounds. But generally, like they're probably going to be quite uncomfortable if you're dressing them something like that. But they also, unlike if you're like dressing a human, they don't have that power to really say this is really uncomfortable. Can you get this off me? I mean, they could like bark or they could scream, but they ultimately have no choice in the matter, and they're really powerless to the Spider-Man suit. So I would strongly suggest, both for fast fashion and environment, and like not buying unnecessary costumes for Halloween. Just like we wouldn't buy costumes for Halloween for ourselves, we just make do with what we have. Or like I think my sister did like Men in Black, so she just like took my suit that I wear for school, and then with a different tie, and some gel in her hair, and sunglasses, something like that. And that's the sort of costume that you could do. And she did it with a bunch of friends. They all saw Wet Knit on. It's like Men in Black. That's the sort of costume that you can do without needing to buy ridiculous amounts of costumes every year just for one night. And so the same applies to your pets.
And I mean, if you do want to dress up your pet as well, I mean, like Oscar said, same applies to your pets. You make your own. You can make your own pet costume, make your own Spider-Man costume, and shove your little
Yeah.
sausage
So I
dog
think
into
the
it
Men
or
in
whatever.
Black actually have a pug, right? And we have a pug, so it was the perfect costume for my sister and her friends to do. But rather than dressing Monty up in a suit, they just added like this tiny little tie, and put that around his collar, so he probably couldn't even feel it. But I'm praising you for once, Phoebe. Phoebe's here.
Hello.
Usually I talk
with
badly about
Hisho?
you on the podcast, but yeah, Hisho's here.
Hi,
But
Hisho.
I was just talking about how you did a sustainable Halloween costume, right? By just taking stuff that we already had and not forcing Monty into some ridiculous costume.
He wore a tie.
Exactly, he wore a tie, but I don't think he knew that he was wearing a tie, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
I think
great.
Hisham is Phoebe just texted you?
Yeah, he told me to come and
Yeah.
annoy you.
Wait, did he? Hisho, you're evil. Do you have anything to say about Monty?
Monty's cute.
He's cute, yeah. What do you think about people owning snakes as pets?
Fun. I would quite like a snake. Be cool.
I'm not sure that's the message you're actually trying to send. He showed you want to rectify her.
It'd be cool. You'd be like a nice slimy little snake.
Great.
Bye.
Okay.
She says hi.
Okay, great. Close the door, please. Okay, that was not an interruption. That was an interview with the general public. Now let's move on.
Yeah, that was. All right. So what I was saying is reptiles and this sort of obsession with owning exotic pets is a pretty big problem. And snakes are becoming worryingly common as pets. Snakes and all types of lizards and salamanders salamanders I think would be amphibians, but I mean just reptiles and amphibians, I guess, are both, on rapid decline already in nature, in their habitats. They're greatly affected already, climate change and by global warming as far as it's come as of now. And so to be taking them out of their habitat and putting them in little enclosures and calling them pets is a pretty big problem. And then you have a problem with species that end up escaping. And so, I mean, in one case in Florida, I'm sure some of you guys have heard about this, but there were a lot of cases of people who owned these what were they? They were pythons. They were
Burmese pythons?
Burmese pythons, yeah. Burmese pythons that were and people, who owned them and were sick of looking after them would after a while just be like, okay, I don't want you anymore. Just sort of like the way you'd kick a dog out of your house. Well, I hope you wouldn't, but just like that, and they just throw their snake out the back door, and eventually, I mean, they made it to the Everglades, and the Everglades are sort of ideal for them, and so they've managed to take over and rapidly reproduce in the Everglades, and so now they're an invasive species to the Everglades, and there are some people that are trying to reduce their numbers, but it's really hard, and so, and this has happened with other species too, and so having these exotic species as pets just en masse and letting random people own them is just a little bit worrying, and something that I think should just be at everyone's attention.
Oh my gosh. I was just when you were talking about pythons, I was looking up like where does the word python come from, because it sounds like a Greek ending, but it's not like a second declension neuter ending. It comes from Python, which is the name of a mythological enormous serpent slain by Apollo at Delphi, which is where the oracle is. But then on this Wiktionary
Wow.
page, there's this horrifying picture of a python Python natalensis constricting a goat, which is slightly
Oh,
horrifying. It looks like there's two as well. Or is that like the massive horn on the
yeah,
goat, or what? No, it's the
yeah.
underbelly of the snake is covered differently to the top.
Oh.
Wow, that's a big snake.
But I mean, one of the big problems with these guys being in like the Everglades is that they're starting to outcompete the alligators and crocodiles. I think the Everglades is the only place where both alligators and crocodiles exist. But I mean, these new large reptiles that have been introduced, these pythons, are now, adding competition to the ecosystem, and that's creating this strain and this unhealthy competition that with these new invasive species. And so it is worrying to see how normal um, exotic pets have become. Oscar, would you like to talk about these larger species and game species?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar story with exotic species. For example, in Africa, like I know lions, tigers. I know you see these sorts of things on the internet about tigers or any sort of exotic animal being befriended by a human, and it might look cute, but and maybe that is an okay relationship, but like, how do you take an animal like that out of the wild and turn them into a pet sustainably or morally? That's just not something that you should be doing, and I don't think people should be spreading these things to in any way that could normalize this idea of having exotic animals as pets. I mean, it's strange enough that like wolves turned into dogs and started being really friendly to us. I mean, cats were never really domesticated; they're still feral, but that's strange enough. Um, it's we don't really want to go any further with this really strange, unnatural relationship that we have with these animals, and yeah, do not attempt to domesticate animals yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing as well, is that we can't, like, these are the types of animals you can't create those bonds with. There's no emotional bond between you and the python that you own. I actually I heard of this story the other day where like a lady let her python out because she thought that was a good idea, and it like ate her kid or something.
Oh
Like
god.
there's all these crazy stories. Like you just, I mean, it's a wild animal that you've put in a cage and called your pet, and so you're trying to domesticate an animal that's not domestic, that can't be domesticated, that can't be.
I think we're using the word domesticated wrongly. I think there's tame, which you can do with an animal, and then domestication is sort of a longer sort of selective breeding evolutionary process. But yeah,
Would you like to give your vegan perspective now?
yeah. So I mean, we've sort of touched on this already about like how can people like take animals out of the wild or just release them back into the wild when they're obviously going to die, and I think more broadly, I don't think it's actually that much of a uncommon perspective that the breeding of pets is largely immoral. And I think most people would agree that a lot of sort of puppy farms or puppy mills or any these sorts of things are truly horrifying. But more broadly, I think the idea of breeding these animals, especially with breeds like pugs or French bulldogs that have these deformed faces or other features that we're making these animals ridiculous just because we think that they look cute or whatever. And I don't think that's really the way to treat sentient beings. I don't think we should be seeing them these objects. We just want to like change them to make them cute. And in defense of myself, I've obviously said that we have a pug, but we did not buy this pug from a breeder because I think that would definitely be an immoral thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's because, I mean, obviously humans in their value systems generally see humans as like as higher beings. And so I mean, I guess it's easy for some people to say the dog's a lower species, and it's okay for me to manipulate their breeding cycles and allow for these deformities. I don't know how, I mean, I guess it's just like humans are more powerful, and so it's okay. I don't
But
know
yeah,
what
I
the.
mean, might doesn't make right, so that's why it's really not justifiable, the sort of things that we do. And if you thought about in any sort of vaguely human context about manipulating the sort of people's genetic material almost because that makes them, because we want to view them as an object, right? So really, my vegan perspective is not that we should stop having pets, but rather that we just need to change the way we think about pets, from rather than thinking of them as these objects that we just bring in because we want them to love us really, and we want to have cuddles or whatever, and that you jettison at the first moment that they euthanize them when anything goes wrong, or I mean, I've read horrifying stories from vets about how families have just gotten bored of their dog and then just gone to the vet and asked the vet to euthanize the dog, which is just horrifying. And that the issue with that is very much the mindset around how we think about animals. And so even just the
I
name
mean, we
change
see them as like a
from a pet,
disposable
yeah, we see them as disposable.
toy. Yeah.
Even then, just changing the name from a pet to a companion animal signifies that it's much more of a two-way relationship of provision, and that we should really care about them as individuals and work to prolong their life as much as possible and prolong their happiness as much as possible as well, acting in their interest rather than our own. And part of that is definitely not buying pets from breeders and not supporting the breeding of pets. But very much, there are so many pets in rescue centres that are in need of rescue and in need of a loving family. And so we should be supporting those way ahead of breeding animals for our own desires.
All right. Time for
Time for solutions.
consumerism.
But time first for some music.
You're listening to Fighting Failure. This is episode 38, all about pets and their contribution to the climate emergency. Episode 38 is from the Consumerism section of Season 3, Material World. If you want to support our work, find the Patreon link in the description. But the most important thing that you can do is share this podcast with others. Now, on to the solutions.
Well, I think the solutions are quite simple, really, regarding the last few points that we made in the problem section. Biodegradable poo bags. If we think about, especially about how poo itself is biodegradable, then adding biodegradable poo bags into that mix, they're fairly easy to get online. Order a bunch of them, and then just use those instead. Make sure you always bring a few with you, and then you can pick up your poop and bin it sustainably.
Be judicious with your choice of pet accessories. Don't buy too many unnecessarily. How many leashes do you need? How many collars do you need? How many toys do your pets need? How many treats do you need? I mean, just in terms of these pet accessories, just don't go crazy. If you're thinking about it, buying an exotic reptile or amphibian, maybe think again. But if you do, or if you have one, make sure not to release it. Make sure not to let it escape. Keep it in its enclosure at all times. And if you ever get sick of it, don't throw it out the back door. Hand it into some facilities or find someone else who'll take it in. Don't.
But if you've bought a pet, it is your responsibility to care for that pet, ultimately. You can't just throw it away. You've dug yourself into the hole. You're going to need to build yourself out again. And so whether that means paying someone else to take the pet or taking it to a rescue centre or just caring for it for longer, you can't just dispose of a pet just because you've gotten bored of it.
You can't kill it when you get bored with it. You can't be like, no, I'm done with this snake, and maybe be like, I don't want to throw it out the back door, but I don't want it anymore. And you can't just kill it, right? Reptiles, they can have long lives. And you don't want to just cut it short because you're sick of it.
Yeah, and so let that be a warning to anyone who has not purchased a reptile. Don't purchase a reptile.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't. Regarding pet food, Oscar, would you like to?
So there are some groups that try to produce more sustainable pet food by using insect protein instead of meat protein, reducing the strain on the meat industry, shifting it to elsewhere. Obviously, I definitely have my concerns about insect farming. I don't think it's nearly as sustainable as plant farming. But I think the evidence does show that it has less carbon emissions than animal farming does, or big mammal farming does, or fish farming or anything like that. And it's not mainstream though, so it's going to be expensive. So if you're willing to pay more for more sustainable pet food, I would definitely advise getting just plant-based pet food instead. I've had a look into this. It's scarily expensive, but it definitely exists. And for dogs, if you get the right brand, it's definitely healthy for dogs. Cats, the jury's sort of still out because unlike dogs, cats are sort of obligate carnivores. However, if you think about the nutrition that they actually need to get from meat, then the only sort of nutrient that's missing is this thing called taurine, which can be synthesized. So I think it probably is possible to get vegan cat food that has synthetic taurine, or to have plant-based food with then it's like 99 plant-based that has this animal-derived taurine in it. But ultimately, I don't think the evidence base for whether that's healthy for cats is nearly as well developed as the evidence regarding plant-based dog food.
Yeah, and then of course, I mean, just always look for the organic or non-GMO symbol when purchasing pet food, when purchasing anything really. Look for that little logo. I mean, if it's certified, if it's organic, if it's non-GMO, if it's, I mean, there's also other certifications that it can have that make it, that mean that it's more.
Yeah, ultimately, considering how expensive plant-based options are, with a heavy heart, I would just say buy the best pet food you can afford. Because even getting like,
I mean, and even if it's not the best, I mean, you can still find, I'm sure you can still find cheap pet food that is non-GMO. Like there's still ways to find slightly better foods, and often it's just right there on the packaging, on that plastic, unfortunately plastic packaging. It's right there, and I would just look for that. I mean, I just keep your eyes open, right? Don't blindly purchase pet food. And as for packaging, I mean, there's not much that we can do. In fact, there's nothing that we can really do about that. I don't know what Oz thinks.
yeah, no,
Yeah, unfortunately.
no, and in terms of treats, obviously, compared to massive bags of pet food, the packaging on a tree is going to be a lot more inefficient. And so, how many treats do you really need? Just give your pets cuddles instead. You can always home make treats as well, or maybe, I mean, I know like dogs like strawberries or something, but just do your research, because there are certain things that dogs can't have that may very well be present in your house, like onions or garlic or chocolate or that sort of thing. Yeah. So just do your research on that.
So there's all types of things, but I mean, there's definitely, I mean, there's recipes all over the internet on how to make there's different types of dog treats. I mean, my sister's made dog treats before. Like, you can do it. You can do it. I tried to eat one actually, because it can't kill you, because but they don't taste good.
I mean,
So yeah, I
like,
mean,
before we finish, like, what do you think about like dog ice cream and dog chocolate? Because to me, those things are just like totally ridiculous.
yeah, I mean, it's that goes back to that. It's sort of like fashion for
We're
dogs.
trying to
Yeah,
like put things that we
it's
enjoy onto them that they probably just don't.
yeah.
Obviously.
I mean, and those are things that dogs can't eat, and we've just sort of created ways for dogs to eat things that they're not supposed to naturally eat, like chocolate. Dogs can't eat chocolate. Dogs weren't made to eat chocolate. I mean, some dogs are fat and want to eat everything, like my dog Bella, but I mean, dogs don't necessarily want to eat chocolate. So, I mean, why are we trying to find ways to feed our dogs chocolate and feed our dogs ice cream? It's just unnecessary. It's unnecessary production wise. It's unnecessary for you to pay for that. I mean, it's expensive too. Why would you? Like, they get just as much of a kick out of a scrap piece of biltong, licking your plate when you're done eating or whatever, than as they do from eating that scoop of doggy ice cream that you bought them. Like, it's just consumerism, and in fashion, and it's just kind of unnecessary. Yeah, so I think that's all, guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, guys. See you in a fortnight. Fighting Failure was researched and written this week by Hisham Kanaan. Additional writing input from Oscar Archibald. Produced by Oscar Archibald. The Fighting Failure podcast is a production of Fighting Failure. fightingfailure.earth.
You said that so fast. Okay, that was good. I mean, it was fine.
Yeah, it was okay. It'll do. I think this sort of thing was mostly recapping stuff we talked about before, but it's useful because if people are sort of like looking for information about pets, it encapsulates it all into one episode.